The Trans-Pacific Partnership, primarily an economic agreement, could impact on Australia's diplomatic relationships with Southeast Asia. Alex Darling reports. The deal has been led by the US as part of its strategy to become the dominant power in the Pacific, curtailing China's influence. Director of the International Economy Program at the Lowy Institute, Dr. Leon Berkelmans, says Australia needs to take note of the power games and maintain healthy relationships with both powers to help stabilise the region.
We have good relationships with the US, we have a lot in common with the US, and we have good relationships with the Chinese as well. We don't have to choose at this point, and hopefully we never have to choose.
Sitting at his laptop, 17-year-old Joshua Rogers looks like any other digitally literate teen. But how Josh spends his time with technology is having a big impact.
It's partially being a good Samaritan type of thing. Why do people do anything other than for money?
In late July, Josh bypassed the security of global payment-making website PayPal. He then uploaded a post and video to his blog showing people how it's done.
Just to use up time and to better the community, really.
Rogers has also exposed security flaws in the websites of Public Transport Victoria and Skype over the course of this year. The first resulted in an official police warning, the second a reward of $3,000. Josh's work is what is commonly known as white hat hacking, where people use illegal hacking techniques for ethical reasons. White hat hackers will often tell the website that they intend to hack, show them how they did it, and then suggest ways of fixing the problem.
For an average mid-sized Australian company, it's entirely possible if you had a pool of digital natives, they might be able to outwit the security.
Yeah. Melbourne University hacking researcher Dr. Sualette Dreyfus says young people are well positioned to expose online security flaws.
They'll have better coverage of the board because there are more of them, and they might have a very lateral way of thinking across the different uses of technology in a way that perhaps someone who's older and more narrow in their field doesn't have.
Meantime, Josh is planning ways to turn his skill into a career.
My goals for the future is basically to help more companies, even to do contract work for large companies.
It seems that Josh could soon be trading in a white hat for a white collar. Alex Darling, City Journal News. The world has sat up and taken notice of Melbourne's independent record scene in 2015. The catalyst has been Northcote singer-songwriter Courtney Barnett. Her debut album, Sometimes I Sit and Think and Sometimes I Just Sit, was recorded in Preston and released on the Thornbury-based label she co-owns, Milk Records. Released in March, it became an unlikely favourite of influential music critics in the US and UK. And with Barnett's success, the attention of the music world would inevitably turn to other indie acts and labels in her hometown. The Melbourne indie record scene is made up of about 24 small but healthy labels, mostly based in and around the inner north. While the oldest label, Chapter, has existed since 1992, most have been created in the last decade, often by artists wanting to experiment with new sounds or frustrated by the demands of larger commercial labels. Tristan Ludwig is managing director of Hope Street Recordings, a label run out of an art studio off Sydney Road in Brunswick. He says the number of independent labels in Melbourne is a reflection of the strong local music scene.
Melbourne's great because of the diversity of the music scene, and everyone will tell you that, and that's a great thing. I think it's obviously easier when you're in a bigger scene, especially as a niche thing, and a lot of independent labels are really niche, that's the whole point.
But what's under-recognised is how these labels have returned the favour. 3RRR's music coordinator Simon Winkler says indie labels help nurture and sustain the local music scene in Melbourne.
And in some ways the independent record labels can be really important catalysts for, to galvanise a particular scene, to bring in separate artists together and sort of bring that strength to a community that was otherwise slightly disparate, or and also in a way can act as a champion of a particular group of bands or a particular artist, and sort of bring people's attention to what's happening in a particular scene. So the music might be happening, the parties might be played, but the labels can kind of in a way bring those artists together and kind of create strength and sustainability to some of that scene. I guess for audiences, independent record labels can be really important signifier as well. It can kind of introduce them to artists that they might not otherwise have heard. They see that someone signed to a label that they love, that they haven't heard, they're more inclined to kind of, investigate labels can be really, helpful to the growth and sustainability of the music scene.
Melbourne's indie label community is not a competitive one. Not just because there's a wealth of talent available, but as Tristan says, labels tend to stick to a niche category of music and musicians they choose to support. For example, Hope Street records local soul, funk and jazz acts such as the Cactus Channel. Wax Museum, based beneath Flinders Street Station, promotes Melbourne's hip-hop acts. And Spooky Records represents rootsy rock acts such as Spencer P. Jones and Sun God Replica. Spooky's co-founder Lockie Lockwood runs the label out of a house in West Brunswick, aptly christened Creepy Hollow. He says while uniqueness means the labels don't come into contact with one another all that often, it's still a friendly environment, given, ultimately, everyone's there for the same reason.
We do it for love. Yeah. All of us do it for love. If you're not doing something for love, don't do it.
Yeah.
Really.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's a really compassionate, supportive environment to be in. There's hardly seen a fight in 30 years in the business inside a venue. So that just says something about the quality of people in the music business, Even if we have fallouts, we're still buddies.